Hello everyone, welcome back to my blog about machine learning. Today I'll speak about PyCharm development environment. I'll share my tips and experiences working with PyCharm. I started using it from around March this year. Before that I was coding all the Python logic through Jupyter notebooks, and I should say my productivity improved significantly after starting developing code through PyCharm. If you are a machine learning engineer, developer who are building Python code through Jupyter notebooks right now, I would recommend to look into either PyCharm or Visual Code and see how these development environments could boost your productivity. So let's switch to PyCharm window. And I should say first that I'm using Professional Edition. Because notebook support is available only through PyCharm Professional Edition, which is not free, you need to pay for it. There is Community Edition, which comes free, but in Community Edition you have support for Python code only, and you would not be able to run sort of notebook environment, which probably in many cases still fine. So what is the main advantage of using PyCharm for me comparing to developing Python code directly in Jupyter notebooks? So this would be Debugger, because Python code can get messy, tricky, and it could be quite complex to debug without Debugger, just with print lines and so on. While in PyCharm you have quite good and very well integrated debugging interface. For example, you can set a breakpoint inside the function, and then when you run the script you can select option to debug the script, and then as soon as breakpoint happens it should go and stop for the breakpoint, and then you can step through the code. For example, it's now breakpoint happened next to this line, and then if I move next and call Google search function, in this case, then it navigates to the function here, and as soon as you navigate through the code, you would see that variables are assigned and so on. So you can go through, and then I could click to run through the process, and the script execution is completed. So this is how you would do debugging in Python script, and the same debugging option is available for the notebook environment. But you should keep in mind that this notebook environment is available only in Professional Edition, the one that you need to pay for. So for example, here if I execute first section from the notebook and then move to the second one, and I could put a breakpoint over here, and then I could select option to debug cell. And then breakpoint is set here, and debugger is starting, and then it entered into the loop, and breakpoint was executed. So then I could navigate through the loop, and I would see that sentences and labels, variables are updated each time when I go through the loop. You see that there is new value for the labels is added, and if I go for the third time, you see this one distinct value is added again. So this is how it works, and it's really helpful. And then I could remove a breakpoint and just complete this cell. And the way how a notebook environment is looking in PyCharm is different than you would if you used to work with Jupyter. Here you have the source code on the left side and preview on the right side, and you can toggle between the views, hide or show these views. But the main principle is when you scroll through the source code and you select a particular section, then preview window is synchronized, and it shows the output in the preview for this particular cell. Another useful thing, these inline variable values are being displayed. So for example, here we have training labels. So for the training labels, then you get, for this variable, you get values that are being displayed next to the source code entry. You could disable this option if you don't like it, but it's quite useful because you don't need to look into the variables list here below every time. You could see inline the values for the variables. And obviously it's also useful that there's a separate section with the list of all the variables. So as soon as you go through the notebook and you populate values, you can go and check what values are assigned to particular variables. And yeah, so that's notebook environment. Another thing which is very useful is environment setup. So you can create a new project, and for that particular project you could choose what libraries you're using, and this is done through PyCharm preferences, and there's a project name which you could select, and you can select Python interpreter option, and here you will see all the libraries that are being set up for this project. And this is useful because it's you get virtual Python environment out of the box, so you may create multiple projects with different TensorFlow or PyCharm versions, for example, and you just switch between projects and you get different versions. So you don't need to play with virtual environment by yourself and maintain by yourself all this infrastructure. It's all done automatically through the PyCharm project configuration and preferences setup. There's also option in Professional Edition where you can point Python interpreter to the Docker container. So you may have Docker container set up with all the libraries, and you can point PyCharm to use this Docker container as Python interpreter. And this option is good because you may share the same Docker container between different teams or different people and make sure that everyone is using the same environment. The only thing to keep in mind, if you're using Python interpreter, then you would not be able to add new library from PyCharm preferences window into that container. So you would need to go to the container directly, add library there, and only then it will be visible in PyCharm. And another very useful thing, of course, it's auto-suggest. So you don't need to remember API, and you just can use directly auto-suggest functionality. As for example, if I try to refer to TF variable, then you get, for example, TF keras, and you get layers, and over there you have different layers and so on. So you get all this auto-suggest functionality, and as machine learning API usually is complex, there are lots of things there, it's hard to remember, so auto-suggest functionality is very, very useful. And then when you run a notebook in PyCharm environment, as soon as you start it, it starts you Jupyter notebook behind the scenes. So it's the notebook that you develop in PyCharm is compatible with any other Jupyter environment. So you can take this notebook which is created in PyCharm and upload it to Google Colab. It will work there out of the box. Or you can take it and run in like plain Jupyter environment. It will work there as well. Or you could other way around. You can take a notebook from Jupyter environment and use it inside PyCharm. It works well. Okay, so that's a short list of things why I like PyCharm. So first is debug functionality. Then another one is notebook functionality, which is very convenient for development, but it's available only in Professional Edition. Auto-suggest functionality works great, and then environment setup. You can switch between projects with different versions. So these things are the main things which are useful for me, and the main things why I actually switched from Jupyter to PyCharm. And now a few things which I don't like about PyCharm. The first one is memory consumption. If you install PyCharm and start working with heavy notebook, very quickly you'll see like out of memory, or PyCharm becomes it's freezing or so on. So you need to include you need to add a little bit more memory. By default it gets 2 gigabytes, and in my case, for example, I would go here to help and change memory settings option, and I set to 8 gigabytes. And for most of the cases that's enough, but also if for example, you execute model fit function which runs through 1000 epochs, and there's lots of training data, so you may still get, there's a high chance you'll get out of memory as well when you run long training. So for the long training, I would recommend to run it directly in Python script without using notebook environment, to make sure that it will complete fine without going out of memory. And another thing which I don't like, I think this is a bug, and it was in previous versions of PyCharm and in the current one. If I leave this notebook open for a while and just go away for like 15-20 minutes, come back, and then I see it kind of frozen. I can navigate through the notebook, but this synchronization option doesn't work. So if I scroll down, for example, somewhere in the code and I select a cell, then preview window is not refreshing. It just keeps showing previous cell, and it doesn't show the cell which I selected right now. And it helps actually to close the notebook and simply open the same notebook again, and then it starts working. So yeah, hopefully this bug will be fixed in the future. Okay, so thanks for watching, and hopefully this quick review gives you some insight, and I would recommend just to play by yourself and try to get a community edition first of PyCharm and see how it works, how debugging works, how auto-suggest works, and then you can make your mind. And hopefully the main thing is that hopefully it will improve your productivity. So thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.